Great pole position by Russell in Canada. And he made a sensational lap at the end. With medium tire in the first pole for Mercedes this season, he showed us that here in Montreal, with slightly lower temperatures, Mercedes could really go strong, especially with medium tires. In fact, the C5 tire could be used in qualifying to take the pole as well as the C6. And both provided a lot of grip. The C6 heated up a bit too much, especially for Mercedes, while the C5 was the right tire. In fact, Russell did a great lap, a great pole. Even Leclerc came very close to getting the pole position. Now, let's analyze everything in detail before we start. Of course, I remind you to subscribe, activate notifications, and also leave a like to support the videos that conquer the channel. Thank you so much for all your support. Tell me your opinion in the comments about the qualifications, and now let's start immediately with the analysis. So I want to start with the times. Russell pole position in 1:10.899 ahead of Max Verstappen in 1:11.059. Third, Piastri, 1:11, 124th, Antonelli, 1:11, 391, 5th, Hamilton, 6th, Alonso, 7th, Norris, 8th, Leclerc, 9th, Aguiar, 10th, Albon. The two Ferraris are with Hamilton 6 tenths behind and Leclerc 7 tenths behind. In Russell's room, who had seen up to that point there, up to Q3, the gaps very close, and instead at the end of Q3, the gaps are made to be seen. Because 6 tenths, Hamilton 7 tenths, Leclerc are many. It must be said that Leclerc made a mistake in the last attempt and unfortunately was not able to finalize it. Why did he do it? Look, you can already see from these times that from the last sectors, he did 19 sets in the first sector. When is the best time made by a driver? In the first sector, there's the 19 set of Verstappen and also the 19 set of Russell. So it was really a good first split time. Then Leclerc made a mistake in the second sector. And so he didn't manage at the start of the second sector. And therefore he couldn't finalize the lap. Leclerc attributed his mistake to the dirty track area according to his own statement. In my opinion, there was Ajar in front of me who influenced me. It affected the balance of the single-seater and the dirty area that hit me. Let's go see together the moment when Leclerc makes a mistake. And we see, this is Ajar. Ajar felt detached due to the substantial distance between them at that moment. And we see here the first check. Among other things, Rosberg was also in the commentary who, until that moment, said, Leclerc is doing a sensational lap. It's perfect up to this point. And then Leclerc made a mistake. He really jinxed it blatantly. Obviously here, first check where he can't handle the SF25. And also here, second check, he always loses the rear. So they are both rear loss errors that occur in progress. However, in my opinion, this is not primarily due to the dirty air, which likely had a minimal impact, but more to a very sensitive balance of his SF25, which then with soft rubber, so with the C6, I brought it to manage the temperatures worse if we want. He probably had an overheating of the rear axle and therefore was not able to handle the single-seater. And that's why every little variation, whether it's the dirty air of a driver ahead, a gust of wind, or even a curve that you've approached differently. And so the rear is more overheated. If you will, well, it affects you and can lead you to make a mistake. This is what happened, in my opinion, to Leclerc. And indeed, he said afterwards, in the post-qualifying interviews, he said himself, I was confident we could fight for pole position. It's true. Charles was there fighting for pole, and it's something that no one expected. Objectively, after free practice 2, I certainly told you to be careful that Ferrari is not well placed. We saw a step forward in free practice 3. They changed both engines, both on Leclerc's single-seater and on Hamilton's single-seater, mounting the third complete power unit. And it makes sense because in Canada, high speeds are added in the last sector and you need to have a hybrid part ready, especially in the race. And so it was a Ferrari that could fight for the pole. Instead, Leclerc said, now looking at the results, we are 8 tenths off, so I'm not happy. I'm angry, and Vasseur himself repeated it too. There's frustration after what we had seen. In fact, he said there's a lot of frustration after the session because we had the potential to do much better. Charles was the fastest up to turn 6. We also saw it in the split times. His first sector is the fastest. And it's a shame because he made a nice recovery from Friday. After a difficult Friday, after a crash Leclerc had at turn 4. So the frustration is there. Surely there's frustration for me as well. Guys, why didn't I expect Leclerc to be this strong? From free practice 3, however, he managed to go faster right away, and in qualifying he was indeed the favorite for the pole. Or at least the front row was there. It's a shame because starting from behind in 8th position changes the race. We've seen how this year, how much of a difference that the qualifications compared to the race, how much even the dirty air on these cars influences. We've seen it both in qualifying, but we'll also see it with the management of the race pace. Here, on the other hand, was a moment in Q2, the Q2 where I really saw Ferrari that could fight for the pole in Q2. 5 minutes from the end, we saw a Leclerc in first position, 1:11.6 by 12 thousandths ahead of Verstappen. In short, a really strong Leclerc, especially in the second sector. In fact, they said that the first sector was a bit of an Achilles heel if we want to talk about Ferrari. He did very well in Q3 with the future sector, and then he made a mistake in the second sector, which theoretically was the most favorable to the red. But before we go to look at the telemetry, I want to show you Hamilton's statements as well, because we heard Hamilton comment on the single-seater. So let's look at this one. I want to show you the statements where he says, here it is. This car is like someone who can't dance, someone who has no rhythm, you know what I mean? And I think he's right in some way, because this car, you can also see it from inboard, it's not smooth in driving. It doesn't respond as the driver would like. You have to drive it right to the limit, like Charles does with the setup, or try to adapt to its performance and then try not to overdo it, because otherwise you make a mistake. Or you even use them in the wrong way, overheating the tires. And he knows what he's talking about on this. It's a grumpy car. You can see it in the behavior, both on board, but also from the outside shots, you can see that there's always some correction to be made. There's a bit of oversteer. There's also some understeer. You always have to adjust the balance from single-seater because it's never the right one. In short, it's a car that doesn't respond as they would like, both from Hamilton's side and from Leclerc's side. Especially from Hamilton's side, if we want to. And so we also saw statements from Hamilton, who has taken a stance on Mercedes. And he said, I heard that we would never have taken pole position, referring to his performances. And he said, instead, Mercedes has brought updates. I heard it and I congratulate them. Their car has always adapted to this track. And it's true, because even in the past, Mercedes has always been strong in Canada. And in addition, they also brought updates that led Mercedes to win the pole here in Canada, to be more performant in qualifying. Because be careful on the race pace. In my opinion, Red Bull and McLaren remain superior. On our side, Hamilton says, I think he still performed better than last year, seeing how Ferrari went last year. But there is still a lot of work to do, and we will see if we can achieve the podium. It is our goal. Tomorrow, obviously, for the race, Ferrari will try to fight for the podium. It won't be easy, this is little, but sure, seeing the Mercedes that will start ahead. Anyway, McLaren starts there with Piastri, and Norris will try to recover, and it's easier for Norris to recover compared, for example, to the Leclerc. But we'll see, never say never. But before we go to analyze, before we even talk about McLaren and all the times, I want to show the telemetry as well. I compared the telemetry data of Russell, Verstappen, Piastri and Hamilton's qualifying laps. I want to focus especially on the last chicane. Look at the last chicane. In this case, look at how much Piastri improves on Russell's time. He manages to lower it a lot from 3/10 and 5, which is the gap at the end of the last straight. Before the last chicane, he lowers it to 2/10. He manages to recover a 10th and 5 just on the last chicane. Because McLaren manages to handle the curbs much better than Mercedes, but also compared to the other teams. If we've seen that Ferrari at the last chicane goes around the curb and doesn't even take the internal deterrent with the orange, well, McLaren manages to be more aggressive on the curbs, having a slightly softer setup, being able to afford such a soft setup. And so it manages to recover a lot at the last sector, at the last chicane. We see that Red Bull loses slightly, as does Ferrari, but Mercedes remains more or less similar in behavior. But it's really McLaren that manages, to make the difference over all the others. The last chicane carries a very high speed of 151 kilometers per hour compared to Verstappen's 137, Russell's 134, and Hamilton's 135. If we look at the stream, Ferrari is the one with a slightly lower speed. Along with Mercedes, however, Ferrari is the one that struggles the most with the rotation of the single-seater. So always this marked understeer, which then leads to having the lowest minimum speeds if we want to better rotate the car as well. This is what can be seen from the telemetry. In fact, Hamilton loses a lot, especially in progress and in the part where the speed is lowest, more than in braking. So this is Ferrari's behavior, and for the race, they can probably fight for the podium. We'll see how it goes. Tell me your prediction in the comments. I'm going out on a limb, guys, seeing this is the ranking. Russell, Verstappen, Piastri, Antonelli, Hamilton, Alonso, Norris, Leclerc, Aguiar, Albon. In my opinion, we could see a Verstappen who can also fight for the victory, and therefore be careful, do not underestimate Max. And we could see Verstappen, Piastri, Russell. I tell you this, the ranking, the top three, this is my prediction. I want to add a few words about Alonso. 6th, an Aston Martin in clear growth. He made the time with medium tire. And we saw that up to free practice. 3, Alonso was very strong. He was very strong. And this Aston Martin, from Monaco onwards, in fact, from Imola, if we want to be really well, also thanks to the updates and also thanks to the arrival of Adrian Newey. JAR, did a good performance, but I still expected a little more. Albon 10th is seeing us, even the performances of Sainz. 17th also from Williams. Maybe I expected something more, but I wasn't able to extract the maximum potential, if you will, from the car. That being said, tell me your opinion in the comments, your prediction for the race. Do you have a Ferrari that can fight for the podium? In my opinion, it won't be easy. It won't be easy. Hamilton will try. But for Leclerc, he starts 8th. Behind Norris, he will have to try to pass Norris, because otherwise Norris has a faster pace than Leclerc in the race. But we'll see, they'll definitely play it out. Tell me your opinion. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos on the channel. I thank you for all the messages and supportive comments. Please remember, a supportive like is crucial. That's all from Rastro. See you next video.